let's dive in. Today, we are going to completely rethink what you learned in high school biology, because we're about to take a tour of the single most important factory on the entire planet. And get this, it's a solar-powered marvel that literally fuels almost all life on Earth. So, let's get into it.
So, what if I told you that this absolutely incredible factory is actually just a single leaf? Yeah, you heard that right. Every single leaf you see is a microscopic, perfectly engineered facility. And today, we're going to uncover its secrets, starting with, its master blueprint. You see, every great factory has its secret sauce, right? A fundamental blueprint for creating its product. And for the leaf, that recipe is the magic that turns pure light into life itself. And that process has a name I'm sure you've heard before: photosynthesis. All it really is, when you boil it down, is the way plants take light energy from the sun and turn it into chemical energy, basically food, to power all their operations. This is the absolute core of the whole factory. So, what's actually in this recipe? It's honestly surprisingly simple. First, the factory takes in two main ingredients: the reactants, right? It grabs carbon dioxide from the air and sucks up water from the soil. Then you need two key conditions to make it all work: sunlight for the energy, and the special green stuff called chlorophyll to actually capture that light. And voila, out the other end come two products: glucose, which is just a type of sugar, and of course the oxygen that we all breathe. Okay, but to get this recipe perfect, you need the exact amounts. It's like baking, you can't just guess. Luckily, there's this super simple code to remember the quantities. Just think 6, 6, 1 sugar, 6. Now let's see what that actually looks like in, scientific terms. So that little code, 6, 6, 1 sugar, 6, it translates directly into the full scientific recipe. You take 6 molecules of CO2, add 6 molecules of water, and then, with a little help from sunlight, they get transformed into one single molecule of glucose, that's the plant's food, and 6 molecules of oxygen. It's a simple, elegant formula, and it's pretty much what powers all life on this planet. No big deal, right? All right, so we've got the recipe down. Now it's time for the really fun part, a tour of the factory floor. We're going to go right inside the leaf and check out its perfectly designed assembly line. Okay, this factory floor is a total masterpiece of design. It's all packed into this large, thin structure, which is perfect for maximizing surface area and efficiency. So, at the very top, you've got the upper epidermis. Think of it like a protective, see-through skylight that lets all that sunlight pour in. Right below that, that's the palisade mesophyll. This is your main assembly line, just jam-packed with chloroplasts ready to capture all that light. Then you've got the spongy mesophyll, which is kind of like the ventilation system, with all these air spaces so gases can move around freely. And finally, the vascular bundles. These are the factory's shipping and receiving docks, bringing in the water and sending out the finished product, the sugar. So, the factory has made its product, glucose. Awesome! But now what? What does the plant actually do with it? Let's take a look at how this incredibly versatile sugar gets sent out and put to work. Well, this glucose stuff is incredibly versatile. A big chunk of it gets converted into starch. Think of that like putting cash into a long-term savings account for later. Some of it is used to build cellulose, which is the strong structural material for the factory walls themselves. Another part becomes sucrose. That's the shipping-ready sugar that gets sent all over the plant. And then there's a small but super important amount that goes to the, let's call it the marketing department, as nectar to attract bees and other pollinators. But hold on. Just like any real factory, this one can't run on just 2 ingredients. Nope. It needs a whole complex supply chain to bring in other essential raw materials that go way beyond that main recipe. And 2 of the most critical supplies here are nitrate and magnesium ions, which it gets from the soil. The best way to think about it is like this. Nitrate ions are used to build proteins. Proteins are basically the factory workers, the little guys doing all the important jobs. Then you have magnesium ions. They're needed to build chlorophyll, and that's the factory's core machinery, the actual solar panels that capture the light. So you can see, right? If you don't have enough workers, you get stunted growth. And if you don't have enough machinery, well, the factory turns yellow and production just grinds to a halt. And this brings us to a really crucial point. Even a factory as perfectly designed as this one can have a bad day. So let's look at what happens when production starts to slow down and how we can spot the bottlenecks on that assembly line. The key idea here is something called a limiting factor. In any process that has a bunch of steps, your overall speed is always going to be set by the slowest step. It's the classic bottleneck on the assembly line.
I mean, think about it. You could have mountains of raw materials and the best workers in the world, but if your conveyor belt is crawling along, the whole factory is slow. Simple as that.
And you can actually see this in action when you look at production charts. So if a line on a graph is going up as you increase, say, light intensity, that tells you that light was your bottleneck. But as soon as that line flattens out, boom, you know something else has taken over as the new bottleneck. Maybe now you've run out of raw materials, like carbon dioxide. For our little leaf factory, the main bottlenecks are almost always one of three things: light intensity, CO2 concentration, or the temperature.
And here's a really cool part. We can actually see these changes happen in real time with a simple indicator. There's a fantastic little rhyme to remember it. Purple plants power up, yellow plants yawn out CO2. See, when a plant is photosynthesizing like crazy, it's using up all the CO2, which turns an indicator purple. But in the dark, when it's just breathing and releasing CO2, the indicator turns yellow. It's a perfect visual cue of the factory's output at any given moment.
So when you look at the whole picture, from its chemical recipe all the way to its physical structure, the leaf has absolutely mastered this perfect, delicate balance. And that kind of leaves us with a pretty big question, doesn't it? In our own search for sustainable energy and more efficient designs, what could we learn from this tiny, perfect, solar-powered factory?